Hey guys, welcome back to Church Talk. Today we are at Kings River in St. Albans, and I'm speaking with my friend James Branham, who is the youth pastor here at Kings River.
Yep.
Spoke with you on another video where I said you were the worship pastor. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about how you went from being youth pastor to youth and worship pastor, because I kind of know the story, but I figured it might be a little bit better for everybody hearing from you, because
Okay, I got you. So coming in, I was just the youth pastor, and then the worship pastor was stepping out of the role, and we were in just a place of what do we do next? There was something that was lining up, and then it just kind of fell through. And so I approached Pastor Chris and I said, hey, I've done this before where I was a music director and a youth pastor, and it was just a short time. And so the goal when I became the worship pastor was that I wouldn't be the guy who was on stage every week. Because when I talked to Pastor Chris, I said, I really just want to pastor the team, pastor the team. And then things just started happening to where it ended up where I'm kind of up there on a regular basis, leading on Sunday morning. So there was this one couple that was here that they were amazing. I'm not going to point any fingers. No, at one point in time we had it to where I was able to kind of rotate through about 3 or 4 different teams of people who could lead, and then I would step in on the 5th Sunday to give everybody kind of a break. And then God just kind of moved, and people moved, and so we trust Him.
Yeah.
I'm not bitter at all, Rob. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. So anyway, so that's how I stepped into the role. When I did the job in San Marcos, I really didn't know how to play the piano. I was in the middle of literally learning. So everything that I do is in the key of C. Thank you, Jesus, for transpose buttons.
Yes, and I have went to the keyboard after you where you didn't turn it off. And I started playing like, what key am I in? I don't know where I'm at.
And so,
that's awesome.
And so for those of you who are judging me, for a guitar player, it's called a capo. So no judgment. Like if you're a guitar player, whether you play acoustic, electric, you try and judge. Try and judge.
That's funny.
No. So anyway, so I actually came in as stepped in, and when I moved back here, that wasn't my intention. I didn't move back here to do anything that I'm doing right now. So. But
you have the heart of a pastor. So when there was an absence of a worship pastor, it wasn't like, hey, I want to do the job as a worship leader. But it was,
I just want to pastor
let me
the
just pastor those people on the team. To where they're not lacking a pastor. And so it kind of. Yeah,
because I think there's a difference in being a worship leader and a worship pastor.
Right.
A worship leader can be a phenomenal one person who can do it all. But the pastor's heart says, how well is the team? Is the team healthy? Are the marriages on the team healthy? Are the people on the team healthy? Is there correction that needs to come from a healthy place? And how do I walk with people through that? So at the heart of who I am, I love pastoring people. So most people are like, well, if you had to choose one or the other, what would you choose? I would choose whatever God told me to do.
Right.
Like that's just real.
Right, just choose to be obedient.
At the end of the day. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So with that, I mean, I know today's video we're going to be talking about youth ministry.
Yeah.
And so I guess that topic number one is, while you're being a youth pastor and a worship pastor, how's that kind of work together? How do you kind of differentiate from being the worship pastor to the worship team, and then being the youth pastor to the students and the youth?
So I approach ministry. My personal view or mantra for ministry is different than most people, because nowadays when you say pastor, that's usually the guy who's up preaching, who is telling people, this is my vision, y'all make my vision happen. I don't necessarily believe that's my role as the pastor. I believe that pastoring is one of the fivefold ministry gifts. And the role of the fivefold ministry is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. And so my goal is to dig out the treasure in people around me. So if you look at the way I do, I know we're looking at youth, but if you even look at the way we do worship, I do worship ministry. We do a thing now called development, where people who want to join the team, instead of me just throwing them up there, we take them through the development. But there's a guy who plays our drums. His name's Jacob Hunt. Jacob oversees the development. Him and Amber oversee that, and so they do everything that's connected to that. When it comes to student ministry, I have an amazing team of adults who help me pastor students. So the way it works for me is I don't necessarily I preach to students.
Right.
I go to the high school. I go to St. Albans High School. I go wherever they actually invite me. But I go to right now. And I go to St. Albans High School on Thursdays for their FCA. Awesome. And I engage with students at that level. But my number one thing is making sure I'm pouring into my leaders.
Right.
And then in return, my leaders are pouring into the students. So my leaders are actually pastoring the students, and I'm pastoring my leaders.
Right.
And so, because if I try to pastor my students, I could probably pastor 2 or 3 people well.
Right.
And so when it comes to the way I do it is I try to make sure I build healthy teams of people who can help pastor.
Yeah.
And I pastor my team.
Hey guys, just a quick break from the video. Just want to say thank you for watching. And if this is the type of content that you like, make sure that you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit the bell so you'll be notified when I upload new videos. And make sure you give it a like so that YouTube will continue to push this content on out to others. And one more thing, head over to robandjen.com/church talk. You can find like the t-shirt I'm wearing, the mug that we have. Enough of that, now back to our video.
You mentioned Jacob. Well, Jacob has a YouTube channel too, doesn't he?
Yeah. I forget the name of it.
I do. It's not Jacob Drummer or Worship Drummer.
I don't remember, but find it and make sure you plug it.
I'll put it in the description, and it'll be up here somewhere. Right now, you can see us pointing, so it's going to be up above us. That's what his channel is.
And he's amazing. Like Jacob's an amazing.
He's an awesome drummer.
Yeah, he's amazing. But the goal for me personally, the way I personally see my role as a pastor is to make sure I'm investing in my leaders.
Yeah.
Because the moment it stops with me, it becomes a bottleneck.
Yeah.
And so I feel like healthy leadership is who's around, like when it comes to even our, so I have Sunday night youth services, then I have Wednesday night youth services, and then Sunday mornings we have a Sunday school class that our middle school pastor, his name's Tim Van Hoos, so he oversees 5th through 7th, and I do 8th through 12th.
Gotcha.
And so on Sunday night, I probably speak twice a month because I've got capable people around me who I want to help steward the gift of God in them to really help teach and pour into this generation too.
Right.
Because I've seen, and if I talk too much, you can call me on it, but I've seen time and time again how a lot of ministries are personality driven. They're built on a personality, and when something happens to the personality, when the shepherd is struck, the sheep scatter. I don't want to do that. If I'm a good leader, the role of a good leader is to make sure they're not just connected to me, but man, if something happens to me, and it's not always like immoral sin. Maybe I'm just burnt out and I just need to take time off, or maybe God's like, okay, it's time for you to shift and I need you to go here. I want the students to have a stable foundation where it's like, man, I love James and I'll miss James, but man, we still got Rich and Jess and we got the Massey's, and because at the end of the day, I want students in relationship with Jesus, but I also want them in a mentoring relationship with someone. So. And so for me, the vision of our student ministry is we want to develop students who know God and influence the culture.
That's good.
And so at the end of the day, everything that we do, as a student ministry, that's the lens we view it through. Is this developing students and their relationship with God, and will this help them influence culture?
Yeah. So with youth ministry, it's so much different from like children's ministry, from where like the parents are bringing them. So with youth, you could potentially have people driving here on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Their parents aren't in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
What's your all's process or maybe policy or written or unwritten? How do you handle situations that may arise? Maybe it's a particular problem. I don't want to say a problem child, but someone who's causing a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe their parents aren't here. Like
Mm-hmm.
with kids, you can always go grab their parent and
Yeah.
kind of hand them over to their parent because they're here. But with a lot of times with youth, they're driving here, and so how do you handle those kids that are just causing a scene of that age?
So this is a little bit of my history. I grew up on the west side of Charleston. I come from a single parent home. My mom raised me pretty much. My dad, me and my dad didn't start having a relationship till about, a real relationship till about, 10 years ago.
Oh wow.
And our relationship changed to the point where I actually was the one who did the eulogy at his funeral. But as a kid, we didn't have a really good relationship, and so I came from single parent home. My mom did the best she could, but I was the problem child. I was the kid who had issues, and so for me, when it comes to shepherding and walking with people, those are the ones that Jesus, I feel like, always drew close to, and so. So with the issue with kids who drive, I don't necessarily right now have a lot of students who drive. The majority of them are still being dropped off by parents. But no matter who you are, when you show up, you have to check in, you have to sign in, and then to leave, you have to sign out. And if you are a student who's driving, when you sign out, like your signature or your X on your name of you leaving, then let's if anything happens know, hey, this is the way this works. When they come in, they check in. When they leave, they check out. And most of the students who I take it back. I've got a couple students that are getting their learners, and so their parents are still in the cars with them. So, but I don't have that 17, 18-year-old that's just driving on their own yet. Yeah,
it would be the same for
it
them.
would be. Sorry. So and then when it comes to problem students, when you look at the world we live in today, a lot of our students that we have are my favorite students, which are the unchurched ones.
Yeah.
They're the ones who show up and they don't know how to behave because they didn't grow up in church. They didn't grow up in this type of culture. And so for me, the goal is to get it to where I have students and adults who know how to walk with students, who can correct students in love out of relationship, and that takes time.
I think that's where a lot of youth ministries too is a lot of people, when they look at student ministry, they just automatically don't like it because they don't like kids. Or they don't like teenagers. Yeah. And they think that all teenagers are know-it-alls or whatever, and not really. It's like if you just get to know them, it's like they're like anybody else. They're just a different age.
They are they are adults.
Yeah.
Like I would rather pastor adult or teenagers than I would adults in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of adults who are stuck in their ways and who are stubborn and who are physically older but very immature. Right. In a lot of ways. So my question is, and for me, this is my second go around in student ministry. My first go around, I did it for 6 years. And so I think in year 5 of doing student ministry. So I've been doing student ministry a total of 11 years. But even before I was doing this as a vocation, when I was a high schooler, I was volunteering in student ministry. And so a lot of people are like, man, it takes special grace. It really doesn't. It just takes you being able to really look at a teenager the way you look at a lost person. Like they're just trying to find their way. Does that mean that they don't get annoying? Does that mean that you don't have moments where you have to look at them and be like, bro, go put some deodorant on, like you stink, like like this is the way you take a shower, wash your hair, like I mean but that's not a negative thing. Like looking at the generation we live in today. A lot of people look and they're like, man, it's just hopeless, and it's just this and it's that, and I'm not the person who looks at where we are today and sees like, man, it's really dark. I'm like, bro, like this is the perfect time to shine. So looking at people having just a heart. Jesus said, "Suffer the little children and let them come to me." Like if you look at the disciples, like the majority of the disciples were teenagers. If you actually look at it, and the way we know that is because when they had to pay temple tax, or when they went to the temple to pay the temple tax, it was Peter and Jesus who had to pay. Like Jesus told Peter, go get the coins out of the fish's mouth, and it was enough to pay for Jesus and Peter. Well, we know that the only way you had to pay temple tax was if you were a man, if you were an adult man back then. So we know that a lot of the disciples were teenage boys, and so it's, I don't think it's impossible. I think that when it comes to correcting, we can't do it from a distance. I think there's a lot of people who don't have the relational, they've not made the relational deposits. And so when you try to correct a teenager, just because, well, I'm an adult and you should respect me, you've not made any deposits, and so you can't make any withdrawals. And when you do, you've already overdrawn your account. And so you lose complete respect from them. So anyway, so I feel like when it comes to correcting a student, how would Jesus do it? How would Jesus do it? And I've failed at this before. That's why I feel like I am the way I am. I have failed at correcting a student before, and it caused them to not just leave the church, but it's like I pray that they have not taken what I did and put it towards Jesus, because of the way I reacted or responded to the situation they were in.
Now, somebody who's wanting to get involved in youth ministry, whether it's, well, let's just say first as a youth worker, just someone who wants to help. Like what is some like qualifications that they have to meet first before they're really allowed to help with any minor? I know there's
first things first is you have to go. We offer a class called Keeping Them Safe. And that's for anybody who wants to be involved. You have to go through that, whether that's any minor. You have to go through Keeping Them Safe, and that's how we break down, that's just our class that we offer, that breaks down where we stand with issues and things like that, and then we do a background check. And based on that background check, lets us know if you can serve in student ministry or kids ministry or not. If you are a church and you are offering children's ministry, and I don't care what your size is, don't care how big or small your church is, if you are not doing government background checks that you have to pay for, you could be setting yourself up for a lot of legal trouble. So it's necessary to make sure you do that. And then for me, our process is I actually have an application, and I try to lay out every place where people can get plugged into. And then from that, I sit down and I meet with them, because I really want to make sure that I'm not just filling a position because we have a need. Like if you don't like teenagers, I don't want you here. Like, I mean, that's just real. Like if you don't like kids, I don't want you volunteering in kids' church. Because first off, you're not going to be life-giving to the kids, and you're not going to receive life from serving there. And so those are some of the things. And
the class you were talking about, is that something that is an Assembly of God class, or is it something that you guys have come up with?
No. It's an Assembly. It's an Assembly of God class that they offer throughout the entire AG. And
so if you're not Assemblies of God, if you're a denomination, you may have something similar.
Check your
similar to that, but name something different. if you're non-denominational, you don't have that covering over top of you, but you want to do something similar to that. Do you know of anything that they can reach out and get
First
something?
thing I would say is get a lawyer. Sit down with a lawyer and go over like boundaries that you guys need to have set up, and that would be just the very first thing I would say. Just sit with a lawyer, and then yes, you can reach out to different denominations or different community groups and say, hey, what kind of resources would you have in this direction? Church of the Highlands, they have I think it's called Grow Resources or something like that. They're a church in Alabama. They have things that programs that they offer that you can adjust to your church. ARC, Association of Related Churches, like they have programs that you could take and you can adopt. So yeah. So that if you're a non-denominational church and you're like, we're behind the curve, there's some resources for you right off the bat. Yeah.
Cool. Now, someone who feels like they're called to be the youth pastor, they're called into a pastoral ministry. What are some, I don't want to say tips, but what are some things that you've maybe learned along the way that someone who's just brand new and getting started would be some good things to kind of share with maybe if you were going to do it all over again with the knowledge you have now, what would be some things that maybe you would change, or be some things that you would do differently in youth ministry? Just some things to kind of share with someone who's never done it and they're thinking, hey, I feel a calling of God in my life to. I love kids. I love teens. I think the Lord wants me to be the youth pastor.
Okay.
What would be a couple things you'd say to them?
First things first, I would say make sure you pray.
Yeah.
Make sure it's a God thing. Secondly, find somebody who's done it for a little while and be mentored. Learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
Don't come into it thinking you have all the answers. Find somebody, like if you are the smartest person in the circle that you run in, your circle is too small. Find somebody who's got a lot of wisdom, and I'll say this: they don't have to have the largest youth group in the land, but if you've got somebody who has been in student ministry for 25, 30 years and they're still doing it, sit down and have hard conversations.
And we have some of those around in this area. I was on another video a while back, and I had mentioned that I know some youth pastors personally that when I was youth pastoring 25 years ago, they were a youth pastor then that I was looking up to, and there's still a youth pastor now of the same youth group,
bro.
the same
Jefferson
church.
Avenue Church of God,
yes,
bro.
exactly.
Like Jefferson Avenue Church of God.
Yeah.
He has been there forever. Yeah, like,
and his kids love him, man.
Yeah.
And he's not used it as a stepping stone.
Yeah, no.
And something that I will point out too, and it has nothing to do with them or anything like that, but you will see in your youth ministry, especially youth ministry, because a lot of times your youth ministry will reflect like your church, because like you said, you don't have many kids driving right now,
right?
So it kind of reflects how many people in the church have youth age kids,
right?
So you're going to see your numbers go up and down,
yeah.
And so we want to make sure that we're not getting like focused on numbers,
right?
Because you could have 25 or 30 kids this year, and all of a sudden 15 kids graduates, and you're like half the size of your group, and all of a sudden you're feeling like, oh man, I'm like,
no, I get
it, and so have you ever felt that same way? It's like, man, my numbers are
every
down.
Week.
What's wrong? Yeah,
every week. No, I'm serious. Like, I mean, like if honestly, like. So the comparison game is always the thing that gets you in trouble in ministry, period. Because some of the places that I watch and I look at, not even locally, it's not a knock, just there's a lot, like I look at Gateway students out of Dallas, and I look at even Jesus Culture. I watched they did a free nationwide youth pastors conference a month ago, and it was all telecast. And so I watched it for 2 days. And I remember watching, and they had power hitters. They had Christine Kane. They had, I forget the girl's name who helped start Jesus Culture. I mean, like the Belonging Co. I mean, like big name, big heavy hitters, like speaking at this thing.
Yeah.
And I remember in the chat, I was just, because you could chat while they were talking. And one of the statements that was made, and I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. One of the statements that was made was like, you don't have to have like lights and amazing worship to attract them. Like, you don't have to be attractional, or you don't have to entertain them to get them.
Right.
And I remember watching this, thinking, and I put this in the chat, and I said, I may get kicked out for this, but I'm just going to shoot my shot kind of right now.
Yeah.
I said, it's amazing that, and this is not a knock, I'm so thankful for all the information that I got and that I learned.
Mm-hmm.
I said, but it's amazing that every person who has spoke at this conference has stood on a stage with an LED wall behind them.
Yeah.
And the worship team that was leading worship for this conference was amazing.
Yeah.
And they get up and they had the light shows and they had the haze and they had everything that when you look at a
large
student
conference,
ministry,
yeah.
like when you look in, I mean, this is where we do youth on Sunday nights right now. I don't have a hazer, I don't have dancing lights, and I just put like, this is not a knock. I'm just saying, like, there are times that I look and I'm like, because people have always said, well, the gospel is enough. And I'm not saying the gospel isn't enough. Please don't take that. But what I'm saying is, what do you do when it seems like the gospel isn't working?
Yeah.
When it comes to, because I know people are like, there'll be a great falling away in the last days. And I get that. But man, I know that there are students who need Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
I look at statistics. I look at, I walk through St. Albans High School, and I have students that come up to me, and one student, we were talking, I'll never forget, it was at the end of FCA, and she walks up to me, and it's her and a cluster of her friends, and I'm sitting on the stage, and it's probably 25 of them sitting in this huge auditorium that seats like 1,100. Like, that's not, overkill at all. But we're sitting there, and she walks up, and I see that, and I notice that she's using her friend's phone to check her whatever social media or whatever. And I said, "Why are you checking your friend's phone?" She's like, "Well, I got grounded." And I said, "Well," I said, "why are you grounded?" And she said, "Well, my grandma, my grandma took my phone away because I didn't clean my room the way I thought I should." Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Oh, well, that's a good grandma. She really loves you." And then she looked at me, and her entire countenance changed. And I was like, what is going on? And so then I looked at her and I said, what's really going on? And she said, well, my mom lost custody because of drugs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that was the real issue. And one of the teachers who was in FCA said, that's really one of the problem children here in the school. And I'm like, have you ever looked past the problem to see what's really going on? Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. Like, we're living in a day and age where we want to look and we want to judge people based off their behavior, and we don't dig past their behavior to get to their believing. What is causing them to act out this way? Looking at teenagers, like the thing that kept me out of a lot of trouble wasn't even a fear of my mom. There was this white dude at Maranatha named Dan Armstrong, who was the youth pastor. Mm-hmm. And he let me and my friends into his home.
Yeah.
He lived here in St. Albans. He let us into his family.
Yeah.
Sundays we would sometimes, well, usually, unless we could get a ride with somebody, usually we'd wake up and we'd catch the bus from the west side of Charleston to St. Albans. That's about a 45-minute ride one way on the bus when you look at all the stops.
Yeah.
Because we just wanted to be at church. We loved each other. But we also knew we were loved.
Yeah.
Then I got connected with, because of Pastor Dan and the ministry at Maranatha, student ministry there, I got connected to a guy named Ian Flores. Ian Flores worked at BB&T, and he started doing Bible studies on Thursday nights at his house.
Yeah.
I went to Capitol High School in Charleston. He lived in St. Albans. He would come pick us up from Capitol High,
Oh, wow.
bring us to St. Albans, and then take us back to the west side of Charleston after he worked all day.
Yeah.
So, sorry, but
No, you're
but
good.
I mean that's what this generation needs. So
Right.
so you feel called to youth ministry. You feel called to be the youth pastor. I would say don't get into it looking at it as a stepping stone.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't look and say, well, I got to do this because I want to be one day they'll call me up to the big leagues.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
no, man, like this is the big leagues, and should God
Right.
open the door and say, I want you to step into this role, go for it. But man, like don't look
Yeah.
at student ministry as a second string.
Yeah. It reminds me of your old children's pastor,
Mhm.
who was a lead pastor.
Pastor Ryan, yeah.
And he heard the Lord speak to him about coming here to be the children's pastor.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, a lot of people, like you said, they do children's ministry and they try to move their way up to, and I always did hate that. I mean,
Yeah.
I get it. You may start there and you don't really have the intent of,
Staying
of
there.
like moving up or whatever. You think this is where I'm at,
Mhm.
and the Lord changes, because all of us change.
Yeah.
But so many times it is viewed as like a stepping stone. It's like, I want to be here for 2 years, and then I'm going to be here for 2 years. I'm going to make my way up to a big church, and
my goal was simply to say yes.
yeah,
When it comes to doing ministry, living life, walking with Jesus, like the only thing that I said was yes. I'm back in West Virginia. I was in Dallas.
yeah,
I'm back in West Virginia. Like I said yes,
Yeah.
And then I guess one of the last things I would say concerning you feel called is if you are married, make sure that your spouse is on the same page.
yeah,
Like make sure that you're not dragging your spouse along to do what you're called to do. Like don't
that's good.
don't do that. Like don't and I'm not saying that I've done that. Like I've never. Let me rephrase that. When I was younger, I may have once given my wife a book that says that was called How to Be a Pastor's Wife. That didn't work out too well because it was like I think she threw it at me. No, I'm joking. She didn't throw it at me, but
She wanted to,
but she did. She did. But she, my wife has a unique gift set, and so if you are married, try your best to make sure that you don't get that out of order. It's your relationship with Jesus, then your family, then everything else.
Ministry, yeah,
Because if you get that out of order, you don't want to sacrifice your family on the altar of ministry.
right.
What good is it for a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? The way I look at that is, what good would it be for me to win hundreds of thousands of people to Jesus and my wife and kids hate me? The greatest testimony that I will have one day, Lord willing, is at my funeral. My wife and kids will say, man, he was an amazing pastor at home before he ever pastored any people.
Yeah,
So if you're married, don't drag your family along. Make sure they're on board.
so really, in kind of a nutshell here, youth ministry is really, it's the same as any other ministry.
It's ministry.
It's just that it's not even geared towards their age. It's just that's naturally going to happen because of how they act and what they like. So if you're just there building relationships and delivering the word of God,
Yeah.
and just being there, basically.
The
I mean,
ministry of being present is so
Yeah.
it's missing, and people say we practice we practice the ministry of presence, but we don't practice the ministry of being present.
Yeah,
And what I mean by that is, just to give a little bit of background, when I came into Kings River, the student ministry had just come through a very just unique situation. and there was one student who she was a phenomenal basketball player, and basketball playing, because practices took place on Wednesdays, began to be demonized, not by the pulpit, but by certain leaders. And I remember I said I have to be different. So I just started showing up to her games.
Yeah.
I didn't go talk to her. I didn't go high five her. I didn't even go sit with her parents. I literally would just show up and just watch her play. Then when I'd see her on Sunday, I'd be like, hey, that was a good game the other day.
Yeah.
Like, the ministry of being present.
Yeah.
Like, just show up. Like, if you know this is the finals week, like, be like, hey, guys, like,
Yeah.
like, do you need snacks or something? Like just be
Yeah.
present and know the condition of your students. Like, one of the things that I've had to learn is learning what type of families our students come from.
Mm-hmm.
Because even when you have churchy students that it's like, man, they grew up in church, so their family's perfect. Those are the ones that it's like, what? Like
Yeah.
and that's not all, but
Yeah.
but so it's necessary for you to, I guess the best way I could say it is know your context.
Yeah. It brings up a really good point there is like, it seems like a lot of churches, a lot of youth ministers are competing with sports.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go one of two ways. It's either like the church hates sports, or they lose the child
talented kids
to sports.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some ways that you found? Because there are those times to where, a good thing can become in the way of the Lord, and you have to sacrifice that good thing because it's become an idol.
Okay.
So there are those times to where, a sport can do that.
Yeah.
But there's also those times to where it's just a sport, it's a game, and is that child, or that teenager, are they beginning to digress a little bit in their walk with the Lord? How do you see them through that season of sports to where they stay strong in their faith and not back away from their faith because they're being absent? Because really, we only have, in youth ministry, we only see these kids a couple hours a week.
100%.
Yeah. And they're at home a whole lot more.
Right. And they're not even really at home. When you look at the
Right.
fact that they're at school 8 hours a day, if they play sports, there's a 2 hour, anywhere from 2 to 3 hour practice a week. And then my son, like my son Ryan, he runs track. They have track meets on Thursdays. Of all the days of the week, track meets on Thursdays. They start at 4, and there's sometimes they don't end till 10:30.
Wow.
And then he has to wake up the next morning and go to school.
Yeah.
And usually his track meets are in Lately Field in Charleston, which is about 25-30 minutes up the road, depending on traffic.
Right.
So then he's got homework that he's got to get done. So this is where I sit. This is why I'm always different. And you guys know this of me. People are married to the method, and they've divorced the mission.
Yeah.
They're married to how they do it, and they're not married to why they do it.
Yeah.
And so when I told you, when I said this is our vision, our goal is to develop students who know God and influence culture. How do I do that? My goal is to say, okay, what am I giving them, and how am I walking with them to where when they are in their locker room, they're not being influenced by the locker room, but they're influencing the locker room.
That's good.
Because the truth of the matter is, I can get up and preach against it, or I can really look at them and say, wait a second, no, Jesus sent them out. Jesus didn't say come to the church and stay in the church.
Now, for that one, it's being influenced by the locker room, and you kind of see them kind of pulling back away from the youth ministry or just church in general. Because sometimes that can happen easily, because they're giving their all through this season.
Yep.
But through this season, they haven't stayed where they need to be spiritually with the Lord. They've allowed. So how do you reach into that and try to keep them?
The goal is to make sure you have people that are consistently walking with them.
Yeah.
Because relationally, like, the truth of the matter is, not everybody's going to darken the door of our church.
Yeah.
But it goes back to the way I do leadership. So I have leaders who have connections with students, appropriate connections. Got to make sure they've all gone through keeping them safe. They know what's expected.
Yeah.
Like we can track the conversations and things like that. But I've got leaders that there's a group text for our student ministry that I'm not even a part of.
Yeah.
And they've sent me the link time and time again, and then finally they stopped. And they said, "Why aren't you in this group text?" And I said, "Because you guys are pastoring them.
Right.
You guys are walking with them."
Right.
And so I want to empower my adult leaders so that way, hopefully, they're in turn and like pulling other students around. So the church fails at going after the one. Mm-hmm. I can't speak for everybody. A lot of churches fail at going after the one. And when we usually talk about going after the one, it's the one who ain't even backslid, and it's just the one that's never, been in community. No. Like, if you're a member of my church and you've missed 2 weeks and nobody's called to check on you to make sure you're good, there's a problem.
Yeah.
If you're in my student ministry, and I'm not saying that I'm not telling you guys that we've capitalized on this at all. I'm just going to be real.
Yeah.
I wish I was better at it. But if you're in my student ministry and I haven't seen you for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, God forbid 4 weeks, and you're not getting a text message from somebody in our student ministry.
Right.
Hey, let's go get some coffee this weekend. Hey, let's go hang out this weekend.
Yeah.
I'm failing because you are one of the
I think that kind of answers the question that I had, is like, how do you see them through that season? Is you keep communication there.
You
keep
go
the
after
relationship there,
Yeah.
and you let them know that I missed you, but I'm glad that you're having fun, you're working towards a goal.
But we're still here.
Yeah, and like you said, you can't really demonize what they're doing. Demonize isn't the right word, because there comes a time when you are demonizing it, because I think that's just saying it's wrong because you don't like it.
Right, or it's wrong because you're
Right.
you're impacting my bottom line, which is I got to have butts and seats.
Right, exactly.
It's like, no, like
Right.
if you
And it's good to know the difference between that and this thing is in between you and the Lord.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference there. But that does happen sometimes too, is that a good thing becomes in the way of the Lord.
My best friend in high school, his name's Ryan Smoot. We went to Capitol High School together. Ryan, he could have went D1 football.
Wow.
He could have. And it was our junior year. I'll never forget. He came, we were talking, and he looked at me, and he said, I think I'm going to quit football. Pastor Dan was his mentor also, like we were, and Pastor Dan wasn't like beating us up, wasn't beating him up, like, why aren't you here, why aren't you, none of that. Pastor Dan had got us so connected with the Holy Spirit that my friend Smoot was what we called him by his last name. He said, I don't like the person that I become on the field.
That's awesome.
Like, when you allow the Holy Spirit to do what the Holy Spirit said he would do,
right,
we just have to make sure we stay present.
Right.
That's what I mean. So, it is possible for that to become a thing that, man, like, and for some people, like where I grew up, the west side of Charleston, it was the hood, so to speak. So, like, sports is the way I get out.
Yeah.
I got to be good at this. Like, my mom and dad are pushing. Like, they don't care if my grades are good or not. Like, they're pushing me. Like, I got to be good, because the only way I'm getting out of the hood is with a ball in my hand, because that's just the way the culture was for a little while. And so being able to say, no, like, no, let's get you connected with Jesus.
Right.
Let's make sure you're connected with the community. And even when sports are in and you can't make it to a Wednesday night or a Sunday night because you got practice or something like that, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to beat you up because you can't make it. Like, I know what's going on. Just as long as we know that you're still connected. Like we're still texting you. We're still reaching out to you. We're still, asking how are you? Like,
Yeah.
And the dream, for me, the dream has always been to have and we're getting there. I'm not saying we've arrived as River students, but we're
Right.
getting there to where I can have adults who can say, hey guys, on Saturday mornings we're going to get together at Coal River Coffee and we're going to hang out once or twice a month, and that's just going to be our check-in.
And that kind of goes right back to what you were saying earlier, is your heart as a pastor.
Yeah.
You are pastoring leaders.
Yeah.
Even on the worship team.
Yeah.
Me and you are the same on this. I view the singers not as just worship team singers, but worship leaders.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
worship leaders.
So this has been really good, man.
Sorry, I know it's probably longer than it should have been.
It's all good. It's all good.
But yeah,
So,
yeah.
This has been a good conversation. I can't wait to have more with you in the future, and Pastor Chris and others in other churches. It's going to be good. We're going to get some good perspectives. And
Yeah.
so guys, I appreciate you watching. Thanks for watching Church Talk. We'll see you guys next time. God bless y'all.